Can the government tell you to stop quoting the Bible when it's your turn to speak at a public meeting? We'll answer that question today. Hi, I'm Stuart Shepard. This is First Liberty Live. Thank you for liking and sharing our videos. And especially if you're on YouTube, would you follow us on YouTube? That really helps us when we gain more subscribers there to meet new friends out across the world. So we appreciate your being an important part of this project. David Hacker is our Vice President of Litigation here at First Liberty Institute. Hi, David.
Hey, good morning.
I want to talk to you about a case that happened just a few days ago, an argument in court that happened just a few days ago. It sounds like something from a communist nation, what they were dealing with. But on Friday, our team was in Arizona making the case that in America, it's okay to quote the Bible at a public meeting. Please first give us the backstory on the case so we can understand what they're talking about, and then we'll talk about what happened on Friday.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting case. We represent Heather Rooks, who's a school board member in the Peoria Unified School District in Arizona. And she started this practice when she got elected to the board of reading scripture during her open comment time. Each board member has a few minutes to say whatever they want at every board meeting.
Okay.
Heather decided to start those comments off each board meeting with reading scripture.
A very brief scripture, but
right.
Still from the Bible, and clearly so.
That's right. And the school district's her fellow board members at the school district didn't like this, and some people who were watching this didn't like this, and so she received some complaints about it, and the school district eventually said, "You can't do that. You can't read scripture during your free open comment time."
Which would just leave me dumbfounded. I mean, honestly, this seems so obviously correct to me. And I'm not an attorney, but if I were asked to make an argument for why it is, I would have a hard time coming up with an argument because it's so obvious.
Right.
So what argument did our team make to the judge at the district court to try to convince the judge that Heather's right in this, that you can read the Bible in public?
Yeah. Well, think about it this way. So Heather is a duly elected official. You know, the people of Arizona, at least in her community, elected her to be on the school board.
Right.
And to be their voice. And she chose to exercise her free speech and her religious liberty during her open mic's time on the board to read scripture. And that's just such a fundamental thing. I mean, think about all the elected officials across our country that say all sorts of things when they get to the podium. And so our team made the argument in court that this violates her First Amendment rights. She does not abandon those rights when she becomes an elected member of the school board. She doesn't become some sort of agent of the state. She is still an agent of the people who elected her, and she's choosing to read scripture, and she has the right to do that.
And the argument from the other side would be, well, this is proselytizing. Well, that would mean that you can read from, I don't know, a law book, you can read from a textbook, you can read from a novel, you can read from a duly passed bit of legislation by the legislature, or one that's in the process of being passed. But the one book you can't read from, and this is why it's so ridiculous, is the Bible. Right. Can't read from that one because, you know, something's going to happen if you do. That makes no sense at all.
It doesn't. And, you know, proselytizing is just a dirty word for religious advocacy. And we advocate all sorts of different views in our society, and some of those views are from a religious point of view, and some are not. And we need to welcome all those views. And so certainly we think the court should protect Heather's right to be able to read scripture from the lectern up there on the school board. And we're hopeful that the court's going to rule in her favor.
Long time ago, in a career far, far away, I got sent as a Cub News reporter for a local TV station in Kentucky to the local school board meetings. And I have to say, pretty much every school board meeting, I would hear somebody say something that I disagreed with, that I didn't think was right, or I didn't think should be done, or whatever, but I was just reporting what was happening. As an individual, part of the whole concept of free speech is you're going to hear speech you disagree with. And that's part of a free society. That's at the core of this whole thing.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, just as we would want citizens to be able to go to the school board and share their views with that board about different initiatives it's taking or policies it's deciding on or things it's doing with students, in the same way, we want the board members themselves to have the ability to speak their ideas freely.
Even if they're dumb. as often happens at
Well, I
school
don't think
board meetings.
Scripture's dumb, but it's a lot of crazy things are said.
I wasn't
sometimes.
referring to Scripture, but you know what I'm saying.
yeah.
A key precedent that got cited in court was our victory for Coach Joe Kennedy. Our folks in particular are going to remember the football coach who wanted to go take a knee on the 50-yard line after a football game at a public high school and say a quiet prayer by himself out there on the field. They may not make the connection between his right to do that, as affirmed by the Supreme Court, and the right of Heather here in the middle to read from Scripture at a school board meeting. Help connect those two cases so that we can understand how significant an impact the Kennedy case had when it comes to free speech.
Yeah. Well, you really see the ripple effect of Coach Kennedy's case in Heather Rooks' case, because Coach Joe wanted to say a silent prayer as a school employee after a football game on the 50-yard line, and the Supreme Court said, yeah, you can do that. In fact, not only is that protected by your First Amendment free speech rights, but also by your free exercise rights.
Which was significant from a legal perspective, but go ahead.
It's duly protected under those two clauses in the First Amendment. And so Heather's case is similar to that and is kind of benefiting from Coach Joe's case because she is in the same, she's not an employee of the school district, but she's this public official who wants to use her essentially personal time, her opportunity to comment on whatever's going on in the district, to read Scripture. I suppose she could have read a prayer. She could have, read poetry, but she chose Scripture.
Yeah.
And Coach Kennedy's case, which duly protects both free exercise and free speech, is now helping protect Heather Rooks' right to read Scripture from the lectern.
So you've got one side in this case arguing that Scripture being shared in a public meeting is a violation of the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment. Our side, the correct side, we're arguing that stopping her from sharing Scripture is a violation of her First Amendment rights to free speech as well as her free exercise of religion. Her reading Scripture is a simple thing, but the legal aspect of this, the constitutional aspect of this, is as foundational and as big as it gets. I mean, this pits the First Amendment against the First Amendment in an argument.
Well, maybe, but maybe not actually. So let me explain why.
Yeah.
So the Establishment Clause, because of Coach Kennedy's case, is now being interpreted by the Supreme Court according to the history and tradition of our country.
Okay.
Before Coach Kennedy's case, there was this horrible case called the Lemon Test that basically said, government, you can never interact with religion. You can never, acknowledge religion. You can't advance religion or entangle yourself with religion. And so it stifled a lot of expression of religion in the public arena. And the Supreme Court did away with that in Coach Kennedy's case and said, no, we're going back to the correct interpretation of the First Amendment, which is that if something is a part of the history and tradition of our country, it should be allowed, even under the Establishment Clause. And so there's a rich tradition of prayer, of public acknowledgement of religion, of reading Scripture by public officials in our country. I mean, go all the way back to George Washington.
Yeah.
And we've got the history and tradition. But then even beyond that, Heather is not speaking on behalf of the school district. She's not allowed to. She's part of a board. The school district's board speaks as one once they've all voted.
Yeah.
She's just expressing her own personal beliefs when she's standing or sitting at the lectern and sharing Scripture. So, the idea that this somehow violates the Establishment Clause is just a mangled, wrong-headed, and actually, now overruled interpretation of the Establishment Clause, and it's clearly protected by the free exercise and free speech clauses.
So it comes down to a proper understanding of the Establishment Clause, which has been so mangled in all the decades of my life that it's hard for most of us to comprehend what the founders really were getting at when they wrote that. What were they trying to say when they said Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of a religion? In a thumbnail, what's that for?
Right. They were trying to keep the government out of religion. Don't come in and tell churches what to do. Don't establish a state church. Don't say that, this church is better than this other church. That's what they were really trying to do. They weren't saying that government could never acknowledge religion, because religion is part of who a lot of people are and their core beliefs. And people should be allowed to express those beliefs. I mean, the people that came to America came here for religious freedom. So they could worship God according to the dictates of their conscience. And the Establishment Clause actually protects us by keeping government out of religion.
A fantastic part of this story is on the day before this went to court, just last week, her school board colleagues elected Heather as the new school board president, which suggests that the new school board, the new members, get it. So that's an encouraging sign there in Peoria, Arizona.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just a testament to Heather and her character and her leadership, and the fact that she's there to serve the people that elected her in her school district, and to do it to the best of her ability and serve God at the same time.
An important aspect of our model for doing the work that we do here at First Liberty is we work alongside thousands of volunteer attorneys all across the country, and this case was no exception. It's one where we worked with some attorneys who volunteered their time to argue this case. Tell us about who argued it and who they're with.
Yeah, the attorneys that we're working with in this case are from the law firm of Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. It's an international law firm. You know, major corporations hire this firm to do their cases, and so we're extremely privileged and blessed to be able to work with them on this case. And they were there with us in Arizona making the argument in Heather's favor as to why her case should not only be able to proceed, but why she's entitled to relief in some form of the court saying, yeah, you have a right to read this scripture from the podium. And, you know, I just can't say enough about how wonderful our volunteer attorneys are in all of our cases, but I'm especially thankful for the ones from Gibson Dunn who just do tremendous work with First Liberty in case after case after case.
People are going to wonder what happens next with this case. We're waiting on the outcome. When might that happen?
Yeah, I'm kind of encouraged that we may not have to wait that long. Sometimes you have to wait a long time, but
Yeah.
The judge indicated that he would hope to decide the case by the end of the month.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's kind of cool. Now, you know, he's the judge, so he could decide to extend that on his own.
Yeah.
I respect that. But yeah, I'm hopeful either way that we can get a ruling soon so we can proceed with Heather's case.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share, David, before I let you go?
Yeah, I mean, I think people who are interested in Heather's case would be interested in some of our other cases, so check us out at firstliberty.org.
Very good. Thank you, David. David Hacker, again, our Vice President of Litigation here. If you want to see America's religious heritage defended in cases like the one you just heard about, where it comes down to things that you care about and changes that you want to see made in the real world, would you consider supporting the work of First Liberty Institute? Just look for the big red Give button, the Donate button up at the top of firstlibertylive.com. First Liberty is